Hey there everyone, Lord Frigid here, and in this video I wanted to talk a little bit about the new Summoner's Duel mode. As you may have seen from my most recent community post, I spent a bit of time over in the Summoner's Duel Coliseum yesterday, so I wanted to talk about my experience and offer some of my thoughts about it. I'll have some replay footage from my matches going in the background, and at the end I'll actually go into one of the replays and talk through the match. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is how turns and priority work, because that's one thing I was confused about myself at the beginning. So at the start of the match, I believe the game randomly chooses who goes first, and then for every turn, each player has a maximum of 6 actions to work with, indicated by the 6 squares on the little info tile in the upper left corner of the map. Every time you perform an action other than end turn, one of your squares will go away. Once your squares are all gone, that's it. Your turn is over, and even if your units are not grayed out, you can't do anything else. The player with the most squares remaining at the end of the turn will act first on the next turn. And if there is a tie between the number of actions that each player has, then it will default to the same initiative as the previous turn. So like if your enemy starts the turn with initiative, and you both use the same number of actions, then your enemy will have initiative again at the beginning of the next turn. So that introduces an additional strategic element, as you can end your turn early if you're sure the enemy can't punish you for doing it, and try to get the initiative at the start of the next turn. Or you can just burn up your actions on waiting moves, basically just doing nothing of consequence, to force the enemy to gain initiative on the next turn, which can be helpful in some cases. The second topic I wanted to cover is scoring. You will get 2 points for each kill, 1 extra point for killing with your team's captain, and 1 extra point for killing the enemy captain, and that gives you a maximum of 4 points if your captain happens to defeat the enemy captain. So if you end a turn with at least 2 or more units in the highlighted capture area than your opponent does, then you will get 2 points off of that. And then at the end, the player with the most points wins. The next thing is team composition and what attributes I feel make a team successful. I think the 3 key components of a good team are pressure, mobility, and both 1 and 2 range threats. Of those 3, the last one is the easiest to explain. You're only allowed to have 1 save armor, for good reason. So if your team only targets a single range, then you run the risk of getting stonewalled by save armors of that type. I've seen comps where it's probably not so bad. I actually ran into a couple of 5 Micaiah teams, for example. That, I think, probably doesn't have so much trouble with far save armors as you might expect, just because they can, their massive attack stats might be able to just overwhelm whatever poor armor is on the receiving end of that punishment. But it's usually not a good idea. The mobility concept is also pretty easy to explain. High movement, Canto, and movement assists are all big contributors to mobility. Canto is particularly powerful because it helps you maneuver during the neutral phases of the match, where you're trying to just probe each other for openings. And then also for when you actually fight. So if you can attack, and then you just use Canto to withdraw your unit, you can either move them to safety, if there's a space available, or even if there isn't, then moving them towards the rest of your team will draw them to a position where if your opponent wants to take them out, they will have to be putting their own units in even more danger. I'd like to give a special shout out to Yuri for having 2 range, 3 infantry movement with Canto 2. I always hated facing that with my Sita team. Pressure is a somewhat harder concept, actually. High threat range is definitely part of it. Obviously, your opponent isn't going to want to reposition their squishy attacker into the range of one of your active units. If you can safely threaten most of the capture area, you can really restrict your opponent's options. Another part, though, is also your defensive presence, usually in the form of save armor. If your save armor walls the enemy team and you know it, you can literally just walk at them and they can't do anything about it. That's also a form of pressure. And then a third form of pressure is simply being ahead in score. If you're ahead in score, then the urgency to act is all on your opponent. And all of that brings me to my final points regarding how to win. Ideally, you want to out-pressure your opponent threat range-wise in the early game, and then play waiting moves when going in is not advantageous, and then keep an eye out for enemy mistakes. If you know you have a unit or 2 on the enemy team, on your team, and the enemy team only has maybe 1 or 2 counters, then what you're going to want to look for is ways to take out those threats, even if it means sacrificing a unit of your own to do so. because once you've cleared those threats out of the way, again, you just march your team at the enemy, and they can't do anything. And then finally, if you take a lead, you don't necessarily want to try and overdo it. Obviously, your final favor gain is based on the total points earned, but if you only care about victory, then you can hold on to a lead even at like a low scoring point value by simply not approaching. When you have the lead, the enemy needs to approach if they want to win, so you just have to maintain a high threat presence in near your team, so they can't just wander in for free, and you'll basically be able to secure the win pretty easily. So that is it for my pointers and discussion. I'm just going to go ahead and pop open one of my replays from one of my more recent matches, and I'll talk through the battle, and maybe we can get some insight off of that as well. Alright, so here is the match. For this match, I'm actually using a different team than the one that I had captained by Flying Sita. That one was more for just for fun, and to be on the leaderboard for Flying Sita. This one is more pragmatic. It's more of a victory-oriented team. So I have some high pressure, high threat range units in Sita, Yuri, and Ephraim. I have a strong, bulky tank in Hector. He is using near save. I do prefer near save just to stop Legendary Sigurd. Really don't like facing that guy without my blue armored friend. And then finally I'm running Nils. Nils, I wanted an infantry to help Yuri get his Blazing Thunder up. I'm also running Secret Maneuver to get that special cooldown. And I'm doing that over the one that moves the capture area towards you, because with this team, which is more focused on approaching and threatening the enemy, I don't mind the capture area moving towards the enemy team because I could just follow them. Whereas with the Sita team, that was kind of more of a... I kind of wanted the enemy to be approaching more with that team. So, and then just responding to that. So obviously I want to keep the capture area where it is because I don't want to be constantly advancing. What else is there to talk about regarding the composition and other choices? Oh yeah, Nils also has even pulse tie, so that's nice. Stops quick and pulse Legendary Sigurd. Actually stops this negating Fang. That'll take that right away. Stuff like that. So that's the idea behind running Nils. You do lose a bit of utility relative to, say, Duo Peony, but I think it's worth it in this case. So the game actually gave me initiative here, so I did what I normally do with that. I just repositioned my save armor up and then cantoed up 2 as well. And the idea here is that I'm taking, initially just right off the bat, I'm taking a reasonable sized amount of space with the option of just retreating if they do try to do something really aggressive, like move Reinhardt, give a refresh. I can still reposition out with Hector or something like that. So they played just Lin straight down. I don't know how I feel about that. That's an okay move. It's just a waiting move. I guess I never really gave you a formal definition of what a waiting move is. A waiting move is just basically doing nothing. Doing a move, making a move that doesn't really, it's neither really aggressive, it's just a passive thing that doesn't approach at all, and you're just waiting to see what the enemy's going to do next. I'm playing a bunch of waiting moves right now. We're waiting to see what this Reinhardt's going to do. So they still don't want to give it to me, so I play more waiting moves. And then finally they move Reinhardt. But I'm not in danger yet. I'm only in danger once the Azura comes down for the refresh. So I play another waiting move, just move Sita up. And then she actually does go for the refresh. And here I do need to do something, unless I just want to lose Ephraim immediately. So I know I talked about repositioning before with Hector, but I think what I actually did was foul play with Yuri. Yeah, and then I cantoed Yuri back here. So that preserves that same threat area that Ephraim had from a much safer position. Oh, I'd forgotten about that. I don't like that move. I mean, I see why they did it, I think. I think the idea was that they don't give up 2 points immediately because they can now warp Edelgard into the capture area. So I only have 4 units here, so I don't get the 2 points from having at least 2 more units than this team does. But at the same time, you're giving up so much pressure by having Reinhardt here, just moving him back. So I don't know if I necessarily like that. I mean, yes, I think they were kind of forced into it, but positioning-wise, it's giving me a lot. Like, I was able to play a waiting move here, just moving Ephraim up back to his relatively threatening position, again, with the option of getting him out if I need to. And then, yeah, that's right, I remember this now. They used Reinhardt to reposition Lin down. I don't know why they did that. Actually, to rephrase, I don't know why they found this positioning to be good for Lin. It was definitely a terrible idea to move Reinhardt. Reinhardt is the biggest source of pressure on this team, and moving him, especially to a space that Azura can't get to immediately, is just giving up so much. I actually immediately responded by moving Yuri above Ephraim, with the threat being that I'll refresh him, and then, hey, look, your Azura's right there, and your Edelgard doesn't have far save. So they opted, I believe, to kind of half-heartedly retreat. And with this, I think they really need to do more of a full retreat. Just go all the way in and just reposition Azura here. Actually, that would have enabled a refresh on Reinhardt. If depending on what I did, obviously Yuri threatens this space. So I'm not sure how I feel about the way they chose to retreat here, but I think that was the option. And then, of course, that still lets me refresh Yuri. And then they retreated a little more with the Edelgard, and here I just realized, well, Yuri is the one that applies the pressure here right now, but it doesn't need to be him doing the attacking. He actually can't take out that Edelgard. So I just had him switch in Sita, and Sita can take out the Edelgard. And they gave the refresh to Corrin in prep for that. Well, no. Sita's Flow Guard stops the bonfire from triggering immediately. So there was no way she was going to eat a special on the counterattack. I'm wondering, because I believe she only got the KO by like 2 HP, so replicating that +6 attack buff onto Edelgard's Def would have at least allowed her to survive one hit. But she didn't heal, and she wouldn't have killed, so she probably would have just died on the follow-up, and then the Azura's refresh would have been gone, and Corrin would not have had an action. So yeah, I think refreshing Corrin was probably the best they could have done there. Unfortunately, Corrin's just not fast or strong enough to take out Sita, so I just Kantoed her out of Reinhardt's range. And yeah, nothing good came of it for this poor team. Now, I actually hit end turn here, leaving Ephraim in range of Reinhardt. And the reason I did that is because you'll note that I still have initiative all the way back from when I got it randomly at the start of turn 1. And I wanted to ensure that even if they hit end turn, preserving this action, I still had this one, so I kept initiative. I want to have my captain not KO'd by the enemy captain. I want to be doing that myself, ideally. And I'm okay with sacrificing Ephraim to achieve that, especially because there is no way Reinhardt can do this without dying a horrible, painful death to Yuri afterward. Like, even if I think they moved Lin forward with their action. So even if Lin had repositioned Reinhardt out to safety after taking the KO, that's still just two KOs, one after the other. A Blazing Thunder on Lin and then a Blazing Thunder on Reinhardt after a refresh from Nils. So Ephraim is he's bait, essentially. And then what I found was Sita was able to KO Corrin, so I just did that and Kantoed her away. I actually found out also afterward, I ran the numbers, and Azura can only deal 4 damage to Sita here. So that was quite unfortunate, and they did end up surrendering after that. So that's the breakdown of that match. I think it does a pretty good job of highlighting the importance of pressure and maintaining it. So yeah, I hope that you found that useful as well. I don't think I really plan to do a whole lot of Summoner's Duel content, really. I just don't really see what I would do with it. I guess show matches and do analysis like this, maybe, if that's interesting to people. I have no idea. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the discussion and the map rundown. And yeah, I guess if I ever do this again, I will catch you then. So Thanks for watching!